Hi, I'm Jim Shaw, publisher of the Lexington Times and chair of the board of LexMedia. I'm pleased to be here with Deepika, Sawhney. I know we're laughing because we went over this in the beginning, but still, Deepika is, she's just about to complete 2 terms on the school committee and seeking a 3rd. This is the thing I'm asking pretty much everybody at the outset. Why are you running for re-election? What are some of the things? I'm getting a sense from you that you may have some different issues than others. We were talking in the beginning. The school buildings are important, but I get the sense from you that the kids in the building are far more important.
So. First of all, I want to thank you, Jim, for doing this. And I want to thank LexMedia. LexMedia is such an amazing community resource.
Thank you.
You show up, you do our school committee meetings, and I have often had to go back and say, what exactly did I say and which meeting? So it's such an important resource. Thank you. And thank you also for doing this. This is my first time with you.
Okay.
And,
glad you're here.
I'm so glad that I'm running again just so that I can do this.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. So, so this schools, when somebody asks me that, why are you running again? And in order to make a sound bite out of something that is so complex, we have about 7,000 children. We have about like 1,500 or more staff, administrators, and then we have a community. So how do you make something which is so complex and lives in such a complex environment into a sound bite as to why am I running again? And if I were to do that, it's because I really, truly care about this community. And I actually want to help and serve people in this community. And that's why I'm running again. But specifically, what kinds of things really interest me and invigorate me in this? Because what does one get out of it, right? This is an elected position. So what one gets out of it is just, I love being with children. So just a few weeks ago, I was at Clark Middle School. I was with an educator had invited me in to come and do a TED talk with the children, middle schoolers. Okay. And that one session of about an hour and a half, that sort of sustains you for like a month. The kids are smart, they're asking questions, they are pushing back on you. There is you can see growth happening right there, things sparking in their brains. So that's actually what brought me to being a school committee member. And that's what sustains me. Like if I can help a child and the child just suddenly gets something, that kind of aha, I don't think is possible outside of either that kind of investment in another person is very hard to do.
Right.
Specifically, what the things I want to do is, as people who have been following school committee news know that I have been on the finance subcommittee for like almost all of the 6 years. I feel that I have finally managed to understand our very, very complex $140 million plus annual budget. I feel I now have got a grasp of the ebbs and flows and the trends in our budget. I am the one who looks at the warrant articles every 2 weeks. I have one pending in my inbox right now, which talks about the expenses. It talks about, line item by line item, what is being spent every 2 weeks in our school system, and also payroll. So I'm very focused on that because what we value, we invest in.
Right.
And I feel that I can continue now to help, especially as we look on taking on the big, new, renovated, whatever it's going to be, high school project. There is going to be a significant debt burden. I know that the town staff are doing, and the elected bodies on the municipal side are doing a lot to manage that.
Right.
So those are the kinds of things that I want to work on from a duty perspective.
Right.
From the fun perspective, it goes back to, I see such an amazing opportunity. If you're going to build a huge school, there's project-based learning happening there. How do we bring that into the classroom?
Right.
And that is sparking the joy of learning, because if you can, the pedagogy that I love is project-based learning. And so it's going to happen on our doorsteps.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about, whether it's project-based learning, but the joy of learning, And if I remember correctly, in your comments in the Lexington Times, in your profile, you were talking about whole child education. Was
Right.
that- yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. When you talk about educating the whole child, and you say that centers on the joy of learning.
Right.
If kids are having fun learning, then
True.
they excel, and they accept it at a whole different level.
Exactly. So you know the whole concept of flow, right? When you're doing something that you love and you do it at a point that you stop realizing you're doing anything, you're in the flow.
Right.
It's a pretty well-known concept. And so I believe that if we can, the kindergarten to grade 3,
Right.
those are very, very formative years for a child. And if at that point we can make the child feel that, they're a learner, they're a scholar, learning that can happen not necessarily only in the textbook or say your Chromebook at school, but learning that happens anywhere and everywhere. If you just walk down the street in Lexington,
Right.
there's learning. So once you build that sort of self-identity into the child, everything else is just strawberries and cream on top. Because the
Okay.
child is primed to go. They see themselves as learners. So as a whole child, when I think of it, I usually the term about the whole child tends to be that they have the social emotional learning also happening, that they have the physical learning, the academic learning, arts, finding their creative aspect as well as their critical thinking. But I want the whole child to live understand that they live in an environment where learning is possible everywhere. And it's whether they are skipping to school or whether they're playing, a varsity sport.
Right.
That there is learning that all the parts are making the whole.
Right.
But the underground sort of self-identity is that I am a learner.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that same could be, the same theory could be applied to teaching.
Right.
When a teacher loves what they're doing,
Exactly.
and most do, there are some who would just see it as a job. But I tend to think that most people who go into teaching do it because they have a passion for it. And they
So
want
true.
it. And,
Yeah.
I watched, like you were talking about Clark. I know recently they had they have an arts program over there, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember the name of the teacher who does this. But they bring in high-profile actors, and
Yes,
more recently
yes,
they had
yes.
somebody from Hamilton
Yes.
over there
Yeah.
at Clark, and
Yeah.
it doesn't get better than that in terms of
Yeah.
sort of raising the stakes and having fun learning,
Yes.
and which is so motivating. So,
And the role models, right?
Right.
Just coming, sharing your experiences. And in Lexington itself, we don't have any shortage of role models. Jim, you've got to come and be a role model and talk to the kids at one point. I'm going to hook you up with that educator so that you can
I'm
talk.
always around. I live, I work here,
Yeah, no,
the
but
the sad reality is you can pretty much trip over me anywhere. So,
in a good way.
In a good way. In a good way.
You're ubiquitous. But that's the point that, like somebody was telling me, I was talking to Cindy Friedman, right? And I'm just going to switch topics just very briefly. We were talking, this was when the Calyx Lunar New Year, we just happened to be at the same table, we are talking.
Right.
And you know how it happens. Within seconds in Lexington, a conversation can get really deep and really meaningful.
Right.
So she was talking about somebody in an organization which is deals with actually sheltering women who have been through domestic abuse. And I just suddenly turned around to her and I said that, why can't Massachusetts be a place where we make it a goal to make domestic abuse zero in Massachusetts? So Cindy is obviously a much more pragmatic, practical person. And she's like, that's really hard. But I said, where else? This is the
certainly
first
a noble
state.
goal, that's for sure.
Yeah, this is the first state where we have almost up and down our administration, we have women. If we can't do it here, where would
Right.
we do it? And I think the same way about Lexington, that no goal is unachievable or high enough, as long as the goal is worthy,
Right.
by people of Lexington or by our kids.
Right. And to stay on that topic for just 1 minute, I remember when my wife, Laurie Atwater, was doing a piece on a shelter in Waltham. And she was interviewing some of the women over there. And, people say, how they're supposed to give them a hand up and then they move out. but they put so many restrictions sometimes. Like this particular woman she was interviewing had to be available for a certain amount of time for childcare, which prevented her from being able to go out and get the job that she needed to get on her own 2 feet.
Yeah.
And it's almost you take 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards.
Yes.
And it's a challenging thing. So sometimes even regulation will stop. And that's true of anything in any bureaucracy, you know, and it happens here in Lexington, I know, and it happens everywhere.
Yeah.
But I love your outlook, you know, it's very, it's beyond positive. It's just, you know,
It's like, let's do it.
Yeah.
It sounds like a Nike ad now. So.
Yeah, right. But sometimes it's that simple.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about these slogans that are out there,
Yeah.
you know, folks who are challenged with substance abuse, one day at a time, you know.
Yeah.
Just
To that point, we should go back to what I like to do and think about in the classroom. But
Sure.
I'll just put one point that I'm also sort of looking ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So when I joined in 2018, I was looking ahead, and my husband, who happens to be a chemical engineer, was telling me about Juul and what happens in vaping and how those nicotine salts can be very addictive, and they were marketing to our children. So I did a lot of work as a school committee member, talking to just people within, like my husband went and talked to every school committee member at that time and said, you know, let's do something about it. Dr. Hackett was just coming on board.
Right.
Let's do something about it. We talked to the health department within LPS. Let's do something about it. And stuff was happening, but not as visibly. And then, the message only really truly got out, which was in 2019, November, December, when Juul suddenly everybody realized how terrible it is, and every newspaper was covering it, and the attorney generals were, having lawsuits against it. So I feel a similar moment now, where I'm now working on, just on the pragmatic side, what is a cell phone policy? So I'm collecting information and research on what a proper cell phone policy could be, reasonable, realistic, right? And then on the other side, I also want to talk about how to prevent online harm for our children, how to keep them safe.
Right.
So I'm working on that research.
And that's important that you bring that up, because a lot of the stuff, you know, when you think about it, you know, it's the one community where you have all of the kids together, and you can educate kids on harm that can happen. And I do believe people will say, well, what does it have to do with curriculum? Well, absolutely nothing directly, but it certainly affects the whole child that you talk about. Right.
And so I think you'll find that school committee members, we are sort of I feel in loco parentis for like 7,000 children, right? And so with the online policy, safety policy, we actually do not have it in Lexington right now. We have like fragments of stuff, but we'll have an anti-bullying policy. It's all fragments, but not necessarily cohesive thinking about, okay, now we have generative AI. What does that mean? What kind of guardrails do we put in place? We don't have it in Massachusetts.
Right.
And you know what's happening in DC, where they got all those tech CEOs to come and really lit into them because they're not doing anything enough.
Right.
So that's the work that I want to do. And I just can't wait for this election to be over so I can concentrate on that. Right. Whichever way, whether I win or lose, it doesn't matter. I'll write it up. It's a research paper. I'll send it out there. Let people run with it.
That brings me to an interesting point. When most people were home during the pandemic, you were earning a master's degree.
Yes.
You were being productive. And I get that sense from you that, you know, every moment in your day, every moment in your life is valuable, and take full advantage of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I actually had gotten admission and I had gotten admission to Harvard's Graduate School of Education. And frankly, Jim, that saved me, because COVID was such an multi-pronged, multifaceted, just such an horrible tragedy that was unfolding. And to feel that I did not have the skills. So every time there would be a certain nuance of something that was happening, I'd immediately go take a course. I'd be talking with the professors, then I'd bring the learning back. And, I'd have my school committee meeting sort of participation be informed by what was the best practice out there.
Right.
Because we were building our parachutes as we were jumping out of the plane. You remember that time, right?
I love that analogy.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. So it was very, very helpful. And now I have that background in education policy management. And hence, I'm looking to see where I can serve Lexington Public Schools through that. But now back to sort of, I do want to talk about what's happening in the classrooms,
Sure.
right?
Let's do that, because I was going to ask you about that, and not to, because I know you want to have a sort of a general statement about the classroom, but the Boston Globe
Articles right.
sort of exposed,
You're right.
and I was talking, I think it was Kathleen a little while ago. I mean, let's face it, you didn't need the Boston Globe to tell you, because you guys actually take the time to read the results of the MCAS testing. So
Right.
it was there, and you guys were already having discussions about it. And I think the Globe piece, fortunate or unfortunately, it acknowledged that there's a problem out there, and that's their job, and I get that.
I have absolutely, the funny thing is, I actually like the fact that the Globe published what it published, because, see, we are doing well in our school systems, and we are doing very well, given that we are an affluent school system with so many resources and amazing faculty, and our kids come to school.
We are very lucky.
We are very lucky, and our kids come to school. Most importantly, they've slept a full night's sleep. Their tummies are full, and they come ready to learn. Those kinds of things, advantages are not every child's advantages.
Right.
So, but are we just going to rest on our laurels? I don't believe so. And we have to continuously improve, because after all, we are a learning organization, right? So,
and we have to educate every child, not just most children.
Every child.
Yeah.
And again, those let's have big, audacious goals. We should be doing that, right? Because we are Lexington,
Right.
right? We can do it. So to some extent, what happened with this whole literacy thing, and where I think we should go further, is that on my website, which is sawhneyforlexington.com, and my husband did me no favors by giving me a tough last surname, but it's, if you look at the tab called News and Views, I have actually shared a sort of a policy document on it, saying where do we go from here?
Right.
Which was authored the night before we had the big presentation on literacy in our school committee meeting about 2 meetings ago. And in that I clearly lay out where we should go from here, why I think we came to this position where we had children and we had results which were not what we would have
Less
wanted.
than stellar, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and we also take full responsibility as to we have to get the children there.
Right.
So some of the key factors that I feel that sort of stopped us from getting and having or needing sort of this, can I say this on public TV, sort of kick in the pants?
Yes.
Okay.
You can say that.
I can say that.
You can say much worse too, but
No,
then we're going to go viral like you talked about.
No, we'll stay there. But really, I advise people, or not advise, I request people to read that document.
Right.
Because what we had till now, and I'm a data person, right? I did a master's in information systems, so data is very important. What we had till now was just MCAS data that shows up 6 months later, right? And the children are now scrambled in different classrooms, etc. There is no way to really get to the granular level of a child's performance. I actually could see some things. Like, for example, during COVID, we had right-sized our curriculum, and we had not taught, say, polygons in one grade, and we had to take statistics away in another grade. The 8th grade MCAS results in aggregate, I saw the couple of questions where our numbers dipped was on those subjects, on those particular mathematics subjects. So I could tell that was happening in aggregate.
Right.
But in specific, which child was able to figure out polygons on their own or whatever the statistic, I could not tell that. And I'm not sure that our educators had that kind of granular assessment to be able to tell. Maybe they did, but maybe not longitudinal.
Right.
Now we have that. So that's also why I'm excited about it, because now we have actual information, right? The hierarchy of data is you have data, then you have information, and that converts to knowledge. We didn't have good data.
Right.
There was no way to convert it to information and no way to convert it into knowledge where we say, okay, this is how we look after these kids, and these are the kids who need the most help. Let's put best practices around them.
Right.
So, I don't mind the Boston Globe articles. I never ever mind when the community, whichever way, shape, form they come, you write an article or somebody comes to us, tells us that this is not working. Because if nobody tells us that this is not working, then how are we supposed to figure it out?
Right.
If they can come and aggregate, like join and say, hey, here's 10 data points, but this is not working, that's even better.
Right.
But the single data point is also very important because in specific, if it's not working for one child, it's, pretty possible that it's not working for a bunch more.
Right.
So I'm happy they do that. I hope and wish that the community also continues to do that. They've been doing it in the last 6 years. There has been that form of collaboration. And
what troubles me about something like the Globe article is sometimes people don't read the whole thing or understand it all, and they just say, "Oh, our kids are illiterate," and they're not. It's just, and that's the unfortunate part, because sometimes people just take the theme and run with it, and it's unfair. But still, it basically defined our black student population as less than adequate on a very large scale. And I'm sure that, and I feel confident that you and others as leaders on the school committee, are responding to that in the way it needs to be responded to. So, and that's what's most important.
Yeah, it's the children, some of our special education children, they are not at the point where we would have liked them to be. Some of our subgroups, like you said, our black children are not at the points we would like to be. But as I said, I'm on the finance subcommittee. So we had the budget guidelines to be drawn up. And when we first got the budget guidelines, we got whatever we got. And I looked at it and I felt this was inadequate. So we went back and rewrote it. So Sarah Cuthbertson, who's also on the finance subcommittee with me, and I, and then a staff from our finance department, we all sat together and we were wordsmithing it right then and there. And we wordsmithed because I said that the fourth graders for 2025 budget year were the kindergartners in 2020.
Right.
So we need to just figure out what is happening with them. And this is pre us being shown the MCAS data. It was pre us being shown the Dibbles literacy data or the Boston Globe articles and all, because I just had a feeling that it's logical. These kids were in kindergarten, 4th to 8th grade. They are the ones who actually are were in different circumstances during that time in elementary school, and let's see what has happened to them and whether there is something that has to be made up. Last summer was the first summer that all the kids, last summer graduates were the 9th graders during COVID lockdown in high school. So, now the kids in this thing I've never seen the COVID lockdown during high school.
Right.
So, different populations at that time where they were in their schooling have different vulnerabilities.
Right.
And those are the ways that one has to think about them. Okay. Are we done?
No. We're going to start to wind down, but because we basically said about 20 minutes. We're at about 24 minutes, but
I'm so sorry.
No, it's not. No,
Okay.
it's me. I wanted to have you continue.
Edit.
No editing. Before we go, I mean, there's so much we could talk about, and I'll tell you, I loved our conversation because it really got to the heart and soul. I mean, some of the other folks we were talking about brick and mortar and all of this stuff, but I really think it's important to focus on
Jim,
the learning
from
process.
India.
Yeah.
In India, good education happens in very, very substandard places, which is not saying that we don't get me wrong, don't troll me. We need the high school. But what happens inside the classroom is the magic that happens with educator, good, trained professional educator who's there,
Right.
and the resources that you provide inside the classroom, and the children who come in.
Great.
That's the magic.
Well, I want to thank you. This conversation for me has been fascinating.
Thank you.
I'm always amazed
Cheers.
when I learn
we
more
need
and
to
more.
do the LexMedia cheers.
Yeah, we could do that. Let's go ahead.
All righty.
All
Thank
the best
you.
to you in the election. I guess we have to take a sip, or it's not.
It's
a
not.
full thing. So anyway, just
And we're only drinking water. If
yeah,
anybody thinks
in
we're
closing,
drinking.
I want to thank you for
Yeah.
coming.
Thank you, Jim.
It makes me feel good to know that there are people like you out there who really care for our kids, and it's like I say, win, lose, or draw. I know you have the best interests of our kids in mind, and I hope that get conveyed through here. So again, I want to thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
If people want to learn more, you mentioned your website, but can you say it again and spell Sawhney, okay?
So it's spelled Sawhney. So it's Sawhney for Lexington.com.
Is it number 4 or FOR?
Oh, FOR.
FOR.
And
Okay.
it's go to the news and views tab, because that's where I'm putting all
Okay.
the sort of opinion pieces, and that's where they
Good.
can see how I think, or read how I think.
Well, I encourage people to take a look at that, because if it's as fascinating as our discussion, I'm sure people will learn a great deal from it. So, thank you again.
Thank you, Jim.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Okay.